Alright YouTube, time for another video about Satanism, just clearing up a few misconceptions about the actual religious and or philosophical path of Satanism. I've made a list here of the top 10 lies that are spread about Satanism. They don't necessarily have to be lies, but just the top 10 things that people tend to believe about Satanism or about Luciferianism, and I'll explain a little bit about the confusion between Satanism, devil worship, and so forth in the video. But just the top 10 things that I've heard, in particular, Christians say about Satanists that just aren't true. And I'll just go up the list. Number 10, Satanists all listen to heavy metal. I do listen to heavy metal, and I know Satanists also who listen to heavy metal. But to say that Satanism is somehow fascinated with metal, or black metal, or any genre of music just defies logic when you consider the wide variety of people who are involved with Satanism. Actually, it's perhaps best been pointed out by Zena Schreck, formerly Zena LaVey, of course, that in fact many Satanists prefer classical compositions rather than modern heavy metal because they consider it a degraded form of music. That's not necessarily true of all Satanists, but the variety of music which a Satanist may listen to is probably roughly equitable to the variety of music any other person listens to. Number 9, Satanists wear all black. This is a particular Gothic tendency among some groups within Satanism. It has nothing to do with, I'm a Satanist, therefore I wear black. It has to do with, I enjoy the generalized topic of darkness, so I wear all black. I myself tend to wear all black. I know many Satanists who wear much more colorful clothing than I personally would. Mine doesn't happen to stem from Satanism itself. I choose to wear black because, number 1, I think it looks best on me. That's a pretty mundane reason. And number 2, because I'm into Gothic culture. That's not to say that that extends to most Satanists, though. Number 8, Satanists routinely curse other people. Some seem to have the misconception that Satanists go around cursing everyone that they don't like. In reality, most Satanists don't even work curses anymore. Most of them do not engage in occult ritual behavior. Those that do tend to use it in an extremely strict, controlled fashion. So, just because you happen to accidentally not stop for a Satanist in the crosswalk, someone wearing a pentagram or so forth, doesn't mean you're going to get cursed. Satanists just don't have the time or the need to do that. Most of the time we just go about our lives as we wish to live them, without any thought of such things. Number 7, the government is run by Satanists. This can be said to tend to stem from the sort of Alex Jones, Henry Macow, Christian groups, which are run by conspiracy theorists, groups of Christian fundamentalists who think the end times are here, and they try to tie that conspiracy aspect in with devil worship, the Illuminati, the Masons, the Zionists, various groups which have absolutely nothing in common, and they try to refer to them all as under the generalized umbrella of either Illuminati or New World Order conspiracy. The idea that the government is run by Satanists does not make sense. I would agree that some of them live a very satanic lifestyle. That is, that they don't necessarily look out for others' interests, they're looking out primarily for their own. That is something that is common to Satanism. But unlike Satanism, within the aspect of the government doing so, people within the government doing so, they're more out to actively screw others over. Satanists don't generally actively screw others over. They simply do what they want to do on an individualistic level. It's totally different from, Satanism is totally divorced from the idea of Zionism. I don't personally know any Satanists that support the State of Israel. Although I'm sure they exist, I'm sure there are very few of them. So we have nothing in common with Zionism, and we have nothing in common with any of these other imaginary groups like the Illuminati, and certainly not with the Masons. Number 6, Satanists abuse children and animals during their rituals. I would say the proof is this. especially within LaVeyan Satanism. I myself am not a LaVeyan Satanist, I'm an independent Satanist, but among the LaVeyans, there's a strict moral code written down in the Satanic Bible that specifically prohibits harming children or animals, so for them to be harming them during their rituals is impossible. I would say most independent Satanists I've met happen to be very ecologically aware. They tend to support environmentalist causes, animal rights, and so forth. Probably less likely to harm children or animals than a Christian would, if truth be told. Number 5, Satanists are liars. Now, the worst thing about this claim is that if they simply stick to this, they can say that any Satanist trying to explain all these other myths about us that we're just lying, which is a big problem. I would say that generally Satanists probably lie the same amount as any other group of people. Mainly because people are people, everyone lies from time to time, but we don't make it a habit, and we don't try to go around purposely misleading other people to exert some sort of manipulative control. If anything, organized religions such as Christianity or Islam lie to their congregations and try to control them through manipulation far more than Satanists would. Number 4, Satanists hate Jesus and or God, and or insert other deity or religious figure in here. Most Satanists tend to be atheists, in general. We don't believe in God or Jesus or any of these other things. What we do hate is religious manipulation. What we do hate is that organized religions such as Christianity exert political and social influence on other people. They manipulate the populace, and they become the opiate of the masses. It's not that we hate God or even necessarily the idea of a God. We consider it silly. But we don't actively hate Jesus or any of these other figures because we simply don't believe that they exist or exist in a significant form as is claimed by Christians or so forth. Number 3, Satanists want to take over the world. While there may be Satanists who have this idea in their head that they're going to exert control over others, I think that it would be extremely difficult for a group of Satanists to do so. Because Satanism is so independent, each of those Satanists would have a totally different idea about how to run the world. It would be very, very unlikely that more than 2 or 3 Satanists at a time could get their minds wrapped around each other enough to even organize. It's difficult enough to get 2 or 3 Satanists just to agree to talk to one another without it turning into a philosophical debate. And I've had this problem myself, that Satanists don't like to agree with one another. They like debating. I think most Satanists would be more at home researching on their own in a dark dungeon in Transylvania trying to revive a dead body than they would be trying to take over the world. I think it's extraordinarily unlikely any Satanist could unite the left-hand path or even a small group of Satanists enough to even attempt such a thing. Never going to happen. If anyone's going to try to take over the world, it'd be like Christianity or some more homogeneous religion. Number 2, there is a literal Church of Satan. That is an actual building where Satanists go to worship or congregate or sacrifice or perform rituals or so forth. No such building exists. There is no physical Church of Satan. What the Church of Satan is an organization. They have an office in New York City, and they function based on donations and membership fees from their constituency. They issue, I guess, emails or other newsletters, etc., and they have certain agendas they may or may not support. I myself am not a member of the Church of Satan, and many Satanists are not. I live a more independent lifestyle, so I can't necessarily speak to their particular rituals and so forth because I'm not inside of their organization. But there is no actual literal building for any group of Satanists which they consider holy, or I guess you would term it unholy, or sacred in some way that they perform rituals there. There was at one time a ritual house in San Francisco where Anton LaVey held his rituals, the Black House in San Francisco, which no longer exists. But it was never an actual church. It was merely a meeting place for performing rituals. It had no significance beyond his significance which he gave it. And the number 1 lie about Satanism, or you could say misconception about Satanism, that Satanists worship a literal Satan. Many Christians seem to think we literally worship the devil, as it is written down in the Bible that the horned character with the pitchfork and so forth in hell, that we worship that being as our deity. While some Satanists do worship a literal Satan, the literal Satan that they worship is not the same as the Christian version of Satan. They would take that symbol, the symbol of the word Satan, and they would strip it of its apocalyptic meaning and worship it as a preeminent being along various different guidelines that they would create. Basically, because Satanism is so independent, it would be very difficult for me to explain to you how a theistic Satanist would worship the devil, but not in the same form as in the Bible. Both because I myself am not a purely theistic Satanist, I tend to be more atheistic and or agnostic because I just don't care. And because there are various groups which refer to themselves either alternately as Luciferians, theistic Satanists, devil worshippers, followers of various older dark religions, that may use Satan in some symbolic form, but they're not using it the same as the Christians would denote Satan. They would say Satan is, the tempter, the cosmic rebel, so forth, fallen from heaven as Lucifer, or the tempting serpent of Eden, or any of these things. Satanists, if they did worship a theistic version of the devil, generally strip it of most of its Christian meaning and give it new attributes. Some do. There are a handful of people who actually worship the Christianized version of the devil. Satanists like myself would not consider them actually Satanists. We would term them devil worshippers. They're not necessarily of the same philosophical mind that we are. So those are the top 10 misconceptions about Satanism. And it's important that people actually understand these things, because if you assume that we're all liars, then nothing I said makes any difference. So to some fundamentalist Christians watching this, you just basically wasted, 12 and a half minutes of your life. But for those with an open mind who actually take it at face value, you need to understand Satanism is not homogenized like some religions are. It's highly independent. There are many various paths, but there are some basic misconceptions about generalized Satanism that need to be put to rest, because they are in general not true about the organization itself, about any of the sub-organizations within Satanism, and indeed about most of the individuals that make it up. Peace out.